On behalf of St. Paul's Lutheran Church, I welcome you all to today's event. I'm Thomas Russert, lead pastor at St. Paul's Lutheran here in town. Glad you found your way to the auditorium today. Quick little public service announcement. I want to thank the folks here at Lorah Auditorium and the Memorial Home for welcoming us today. A part of their founding charter was that this would not be a place to host proselytizing events or partisan political kinds of things. And so I'm not going to be offering a prayer or anything like that out of respect for those commitments. And also because this is an event that would be open to any thinking person, Christian, non-Christian, and so glad you found it here today. In the mid-1800s, the hottest ticket out there was not for a mega sporting event. It wasn't for an arena-filling concert. The hottest ticket was for a public lecture. The folks like Ralph Waldo Emerson and others would travel all around the Northeast giving these public lectures. Philosophers, theologians, thought leaders would do this, and hundreds of people would flock to come hear the latest deep thinking about meaning, about life, but also relevant topics about what people were thinking about of the day, matters of the economy, matters of government, matters of global affairs. And so we're happy to continue in that tradition. St. Paul's Lutheran has tried to be a thought leader here in Doylestown for over 160 years, probably more than ever so over these last 40 or 50 years since the arrival of the Reverend Robert H. Linders, the Reverend Dr. Robert H. Linders, definitely a thought leader here at St. Paul's, kind of established the culture of our church to be grounded in tradition, guided by intellect, and growing in faith. I've tried to carry that mantle the last 13 or so years to be a faith leader, but also a rigorous thinker. One of the first things they did with me when I arrived at St. Paul's was send me back to school to go get my English degree, for which I'm very grateful about that encouragement. And we are incredibly blessed that we carry on that thought leader tradition with the arrival of Mac Mullins, our associate pastor who came here this past summer, deep thinker, very gifted teacher. We are blessed to continue in that tradition with him. Another small blessing that Pastor Mullins brought with him was a friendship and history and collegiality with the Reverend Peter W. Marty. Mac served at Peter's Church in Iowa for a year, for 2 years, but they were together for 1 year. Peter was Mac's supervisor, and so we were able to lean on that friendship and that connection a little bit to have Peter with us today. Peter W. Marty is a household name in the Lutheran Church. In our denomination of over 3 million people, he's probably one of a very small handful that people are like, oh yeah, I've heard of Peter Marty. And it's not because he's a showy person, but it's because he's a deeply thoughtful person and a deeply, deeply faithful person, and connects those two commitments in a way that St. Paul's Lutheran values very deeply. So we are blessed to have him here today. Served as pastor for decades, currently the editor of the Christian Century magazine, which you can find and take home a copy. There are extra copies in the back if you want to check those out. Also, please note that we'll be recording today's lecture, and so if friends couldn't find the Lorah Auditorium or didn't want to kind of wake up to make their way to Doylestown, maybe find your way to our website, doylestownlutheran.org, and we'll try to have that readily available for you. So without further ado, let us welcome Peter W. Marty to share with us what it means to behave Christianly. He's an editor of a magazine, and so he gets to make up words. Behave Christianly. So let's welcome Peter.
Thank Thank you, Thomas, very much. It's a privilege to be here with all of you, and my thanks to St. Paul's Lutheran for the hosting. That's perfect. Okay. Those of you that are St. Paul's Lutheran members, if ever you have a problem with Mac, just call me and I'll accept responsibility.
And then he will call me.
Here's a star for you. Here's the podium. Well, it is. I had never been to Doylestown. Only time I lived at East was out east here when it was graduate school or seminary at Yale. And I have many friends in Pennsylvania, but I've never been to Doylestown. I used to go to the seminaries, now United, but Philadelphia Lutheran, and Gettysburg. But this is my first time in this charming town. And any of you who live even nearby here are fortunate. I now live in Denver, where it's arid and dry and sunny, and we don't have 275 years of history. So, yeah, it's a real privilege to be with you, and I will try to leave some time at the end for questions and comments, because how do you exhaust a topic like this? I'm just going to do my best to try to address some of the issues of what it might be or mean to cultivate a moral conscience and to be responsible citizens in tumultuous, turbulent times. And when I say tumultuous or turbulent, I think that's kind of a non-negotiable right now. I mean, when today's Wall Street Journal says that Trump's dressing down of Supreme Court justices yesterday was the ugliest moment in recent presidential history, you got to take that seriously. And there's people of all political persuasions that are struggling with the chaos right now, honestly. So I want to try to address some of that, and the way I want to begin is by talking about what I think is a leading crisis in American religion. We have many crises, actually, just evidenced by 10 churches a week closing in America, and people finding little time for the faith in many respects. But I would elevate near the top of the list, frankly, this notion that of politics dominating faith in some rather dramatic ways. I mean, a generation ago, or 2 generations ago for sure, what people did with their religious practice was they would join a faith community, they would practice the faith on the Sabbath, and in the process of joining these communities would acquire a kind of value system, a kind of set of understandings, a deepening of one's self and conscience, if you will, which they would then take to the ballot box. That would inform, if you will, their political mindset. Okay, this is better, yeah, much better. But nowadays, that's reversed. Nowadays, it's like partisan identity and political ideology inform people's religion. They come with these certain expectations, and you see it happening in certainly with certain public leaders, weirdly warping their Christianity around their political perspectives to try to make sense of all of that. In other words, what I'm trying to say is we adopt religious viewpoints oftentimes based on our politics. And when I say we, I'm just talking about, America at large here. So people are frequently updating their outlooks, their perspectives on society and culture to be consistent with their political party leaders' position, or whether they're progressive or conservative. The thinking and the ideology of those is how they're shaping their perspectives. And for many people, and I don't think this is an overstatement, politics has become their religion. What our political leaders tell us, for many people, it's more important than what religious leaders tell us. And I think what I find happening is people are using politics for their moral meaning. And this is a problem. They turn politics, frankly, into an idol. And there's this kind of totalistic embrace of political ideology. And all of you who have any Christian sensibilities, you know that idolatry is not a good thing in general. We all struggle with it. My favorite definition of idolatry is it's something that asks more and more of you, but ends up giving less and less until eventually it asks for your everything and it ends up giving nothing. Or as Martin Luther put it, an idol is that in which we put all trust and comfort in every time of need. And honestly, for many people, that's unwittingly becoming their religion. The politics of watching these saturated news feeds and social media feeds over and over again, I think it's creating a crisis. And I see time and time again people putting politics as the center of their psychological life, their emotional life, and as I'm indicating here, their spiritual life as well. Whatever version of MAGA Republican or Democrat or independent one is, that is becoming one's ethnicity. And this is a dramatic shift, I think, in American culture in the last 50 years. Because once politics becomes your ethnic and moral identity, it becomes very, very difficult to retrieve a rich and meaningful faith. So that's what I want to talk about today, how to behave Christianly, if you will, in the context of this crisis, as I would call it, in American religion. Now, there's many things, of course, beyond the idolatry of politics or supremacy of politics that make it hard to live the Christian life. And I don't have time to get into all those today, but some of these things you know, like the changed understanding of a weekend in American life. As far as I can tell, for many people, God doesn't have anything better to offer already enjoy or have access to or can buy. And so many people live their weekends with good health and awesome backyard patio cookouts and family gatherings, and how can God possibly compare with that? This is a changed understanding of life. Charles Taylor, the great Canadian philosopher, who's written more about secularity than anybody, Taylor says, in the last 500 years, we have moved from a society where pretty much everybody made sense of the world through some kind of reference to God. Whereas now, most everybody in the world makes a lot of sense of the world without any reference to God. It's a big change. So there are many things, of course, that make it hard to lead the Christian life. I should probably have started with Jesus. He makes it extremely difficult to live the life because we feel constant indictment in some sense. His integrity, it makes our pretense obvious. His courage makes our cowardice embarrassing. His love for God and for us makes our indifference or apathy on many occasions shameful. And so what I want to do for the rest of my time here is share ideas. I'm going to throw 8 of them at you for behaving more Christianly in this world. They're kind of like anchors that many of you embody, but I'm reminding you of these foundational strengths that we have to come back to over and over again if in fact we're going to, make a difference in this world. Some of them have to do with rich practices. I always like to think of my faith as a practicing endeavor. I don't know where you practice your faith or religions, Trinity, St. Paul's, wherever you come from, but that's what you do. When you go to church, you're practicing your faith. So number one, I want to talk about a spiritual center, which is to say, the kind of person you are at your center will determine everything else about you. You know this, but some people never ever discover it. The choices we make, the commitments we hold to, the decisions we become a part of, they all stem from what is inside of us at the center. And as Eugene Peterson, the theologian, once said, if you don't have a center, for goodness sakes, you don't have a circumference. Which is to say, life becomes a kind of drifting enterprise without any sustaining purpose. And you know people like this, I'm sure you do, where they don't know who they are at the most fundamental level, in the sight of God, in the sight of themselves, or in the sight of their neighbors. Now, I think it's possible to fake a rich inner life, but you can only do that for so much time before it'll gradually show as being kind of trivial. Your life will appear somehow anemic, paltry, and even if you worship politely, or you behave correctly, whatever that might mean in your family system, you know, there's this way we have of displacing God and moving God to the edges of life. So what I want to prize is going after a center to each and every one of us. And what is in that center? If I were to take you back to the book of Genesis, the 2nd chapter, remember where that tree of knowledge of good and evil, do you remember where that is placed in the Garden of Eden? It's right in the middle. It's right in the center. Which Dietrich Bonhoeffer once said, that's where God belongs in your life. Any of you that have been to Israel, where is the temple in Jerusalem? It's right in the center of Jerusalem. That's the pilgrimage that the people have made for millennia. C.S. Lewis has a beautiful line here where he says, what matters in life is not which rules we keep, so much as what kind of person we are at the center. Every time you make a choice, you are turning the central part of you, the part of you that chooses, into something a little different from what it was before. And taking your life as a whole, says Lewis, with all of its innumerable choices, all your life long, you are slowly turning this central thing either into a heavenly creature or a hellish creature. You're in harmony with God, in other words, or you're in warfare with God. To be the one kind of creature is heaven, that is, its joy and peace and knowledge and power. To be the other kind of creature means madness, horror, idiocy, impotence, and eternal loneliness. So what I'm thinking about here is how our lives, your life and mine, can have a kind of inner cohesion, where it's not just this wobbly, fragmentary mess of cells that allow us to put one foot in front of the other, but rather we have, it's what David Brooks once called a calm and settled mind, a rooted kind of existence. I just think this is indispensable for making sense of troubled times. You have to know who you are. George H.W. Bush, when he was running for president, cute story. He was campaigning in South Carolina, and in 1988, and at a campaign stop in a nursing home, Bush was wearing one of these bomber jackets, you know, that presidents wear in their informal moments, and he's walking down this corridor with all these elderly people, you know, on the edge of dementia, and there's this guy in a wheelchair, and he's holding onto the side rail of the hallway, and the president leans over to him, and he says to the man, do you know who I am? And the man says, no, but if you ask at the nursing station over there, they can tell you. You know, you have to know who you are. And this is why we practice the faith, to remind ourselves that we're not just hyper-individuals. individuals in this world. In John's Gospel, the 13th chapter, the one that churches typically read on Maundy Thursday, the Last Supper, the washing of the feet, the commandment of love, there's a verse in there that we just kind of gloss over quickly. It's the third verse of John 13. And it says, Jesus, having been given by God all things in his hands, and knowing where he had come from and where he was going, he got up from the meal, he put a towel around his waist, and he began to wash feet. Which is to say, if you know where you come from, and you know where you're going, if you know your origin and you know your destiny, you could do anything. You could be the Lord of the universe and wash dirty feet. 1932, May, in Germany, Dietrich Bonhoeffer preached a sermon. And this was 6-8 months before Hitler was appointed chancellor. And the clouds of authoritarianism were hovering. It was ominous. The ground was feeling feeble beneath the feet of faithful German people. And Bonhoeffer preached this sermon on 2 Chronicles 20, chapter 20, where these people are being threatened by great multitudes. And they have there's this beautiful line. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are fixed on you, O Lord. It's a perfect verse for these times, I think. We're not always sure what to do. I don't know the most meaningful thing to say all the time. I don't even know how to react to certain pieces of news. But we have to be able to try to fix our eyes on the Lord. To have a spiritual center. If you know anything about Copernicus and others who studied the universe, it was his move. What was this, the 1530s or 40s, when he finally figured out that the Earth is not the center of the universe, and all these weirdly, oddly shaped patterns that we tried to force the planets to rotate around us, it just didn't work. And once he decided that the sun, S-U-N actually, was at the center of the universe, all the elliptical orbits began to make particular sense. So, we come back to that, but knowing your center. Because if you don't have a center, you don't have a circumference, and life will be wobbly. Number 2, I want to talk about giving shape to moral conscience. So what is our conscience? Is it some kind of divine design that's implanted in our souls that just put in us, and you are blessed with a conscience, and I am blessed with a conscience? Or is it a facet of our personality that is shaped over time by all these different events and people and factors and, God's self? I would say is both. The word for conscience in Latin, conscientia, means a kind of knowing together. A knowing together jointly. You don't just have your own conscience that's uninformed by anybody else. It's always a joint enterprise. And it acquires its shape, it acquires its goodness over long stretches of time, based upon all kinds of different sorts of influences. One of my favorite stories is of the late Senator Margaret Chase Smith of Maine. She died in 1995, just before the age of 100. Some of you Easterners know that name well. And she was the first woman to ever hold a seat in both houses of Congress, the Senate and the Congress. She was the first woman to ever be placed in nomination for the U.S. presidency. This is a long time ago. And shortly before she died, someone asked her, "What do you think you will most be remembered for?" And she said, "Well, I think it's for my speech in 1950 before the U.S. Senate." And that's when she spoke in condemnation of McCarthyism. And she railed against her Republican and Democratic colleagues for their moral cowardice in the face of Joe McCarthy from Wisconsin and all that he was up to. It was kind of a searing reprimand for these people who were sitting in silence. We're having deja vu all over again in our Congress, but sitting in silence because they were scared of the threat of being primaried, if you want to use a modern term, or being eliminated from their office by Joe McCarthy. She said, the right way is not always the popular and easy way. Standing for right when it is unpopular is a true test of moral character. Moral courage always shuns the easy wrong in favor of the difficult right. Abraham Lincoln, second inaugural, one of the most beautiful statements in the last 250 years of this nation. And it was not well received when he first delivered it. You know, the with charity for all, malice toward none. Scant applause that day. The reason is because Lincoln was asking everybody to claim responsibility for the war, everybody to share in the responsibility for peace. And there were plenty of people in the North and South that were thinking, no, that's not the way it is. But in fact, time would prove that that second inaugural was a tremendous demonstration of moral courage. And moral courage doesn't require any special gifts. It doesn't require a certain IQ. All it demands is integrity, strength of character, a willingness to tell the truth. And I think Margaret Chase Smith and Abraham Lincoln are great examples of people who found that courage by leaning on their conscience. And frankly, we have our work cut out for us in terms of developing a deeper conscience, both as a nation and as individuals. Mark Twain's the one who's credited with it. I think it's a great line. How curious, he said, that physical courage should be so common and moral courage so rare. We need more moral courage in these times. And as I said, it's joint, it's built by the company of others. This is one of the reasons we belong to congregations. I mean, it's parents, it's teachers, it's coaches, it's God in Christ who helps shape the kind of person you and I get to be. Our conscience isn't always reliable, by the way. It constantly needs recalibration. The Apostle Paul talks in the book of Acts about striving to always live with a clear conscience. He was encouraging all people to do the same before God. It wasn't like he mastered it, but he was striving for it. He encouraged Timothy to fight for a good conscience. And I think we have our work, cut out in these regards. Let me mention a third idea here, and this has to do with the process of becoming somebody more than we presently are. This is a big deal. I like to think of, and this is a very Lutheran idea, but we are never a finished product. We're always in the process of becoming. And I would say, if you meet another Christian who is so confident about everything and even wants to tell you how to behave because they've got the salvation thing figured out, I would suggest just keep as much distance as you possibly can. Because we're always in the process of becoming. If you think about the New Testament, think of how many people who followed Jesus. They followed him because they wanted to get something from him. They didn't follow him because they wanted to become somebody different through him or because of him, but they wanted something from him. They wanted a healing. They wanted a blessing. They wanted all kinds of things. And we got to be careful as we read the New Testament, not to read it in that light. What can we get from this Jesus person? I was thinking about this not too long ago when I was in a restaurant. And I live in Denver, and it was a Saturday night. And so we went to this place that doesn't take reservations, and the hostess said it'll be about 20 minutes. We thought, okay, let's stay. We won't go anywhere. So we're standing there in the foyer, the awkward foyer where there's never enough space, and it turned out to be more than 20 minutes, but I'm eyeing these two tables. And I'm thinking, now, I want something from those people. I want their table. I didn't pay attention to what might be the joy of their conversation, the tastiness of the meal. I want that table. Well, that's what people want from Jesus. They want to get things. And I want to say, no, it's not about that. It's about becoming something. God's not done with us, and we don't have all things figured out. And there's way too much certainty. There's way too much overconfidence among Christian people. And if we could appreciate that we're not yet fully formed, and we're all on the way, I think that makes for a lovelier world. Maya Angelou, a great poet. I'm working at trying to be a Christian, she says. She is a Christian, but I'm working at trying to be a Christian. It's serious business. It's not something where you think, oh, I got it done. I did it all day, hot diggity. The truth is, all day long you try to do it, you try to be it, and then in the evening, if you're honest and you have a little courage, you look at yourself and you say, I only blew it 86 times. Not bad. I'm trying to be a Christian. Martin Luther has a line that not many people know, but I swear it's probably the origin of the t-shirt that says, the journey is the destination. Luther, this life is not righteousness, but growth in righteousness. It's not health, but healing. It's not being, but becoming. It's not rest, but exercise. We are not yet what we shall be, but we are growing toward it. The process is not yet finished, but it is going on. This is not the end, but it is the road. Again, back to Maya Angelou and faith. We always tend to celebrate speed and proficiency in life, and people, they want faith, they want big faith, they want it now, and they get frustrated if it's not there. But many years ago, I have to take you back to the name Brian Gumbel, who was Today's Show host, and he's interviewing Maya Angelou. And he's, at this point in her career, he said, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And she said, well, I'd like to become a better human being. That's one thing. I want to become a better writer. And then she said, I'd also like to become a Christian. Again, she's practicing Christian faith, but I'd like to become a Christian. She said, sometimes I'll meet a person who says to me, I'm a Christian. And I would say, you are? Already? My goodness, you're fast. You know? It's a great reminder that these things take time. None of us is born virtuous. We don't come out of the womb with reverence, right? We learn these things. We learn these virtues of selfless love and a forgiving spirit and so much more. Somebody had to teach us these things. Mercy, generosity, awe. They don't just naturally occur. This is not true in the animal world. You could be a giraffe and give birth to a giraffe, and that giraffe is walking within like 5 minutes. Or little ducklings. They can fly in their second day. Not so with us. We acquire these things over long periods of time, thanks to a lot of practice and a lot of good influence. The 9 fruits of the Spirit in the book of Galatians. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, self-control, rest. Which one of you in this room has too much patience? Come talk to me afterwards if you say, I just lost with too much patience. I never get impatient. My wife and I have this interesting little exchange every so often. We plot our charities carefully because we try to give a lot of money away. We have some bigger ones and some littler ones, and every time she comes across a new one, she's, I think we need to send in a couple $100. And I'll say, honey, we've already mapped out our giving for this year, and I think we got to be realistic here. There's always so much money in the bank account. And she always says the same thing. She says, Peter, when have we ever been too generous? I think, well, that's not a fair question because there's no answer to that. except you're right. When have we been too generous? I think that's true of the gifts of the Spirit as well. We're always in the process of becoming, trying to develop a greater moral character within ourselves. Marion Buddy, the Bishop of Washington, D.C., when she preached her now famous sermon at the cathedral last January upon Trump's second inaugural, you'll recall the famous lines for which she was chastised. She just pleaded with the president to show some mercy, to display some compassion towards people who are scared, immigrants, refugees, LGBTQ community. And if you recall the aftermath, she was scolded. I mean, the president called her behavior nasty, unfit for the job, in some way, shape, or form, just not cut out to be, demanded you owe the public an apology. What was happening there? This is what I think was happening. There's so much religious language that our culture doesn't even understand anymore. I don't know if Trump really has a deep understanding of the concept of mercy. It's not that he was angry at Buddy herself for the claims she was making. I don't think he has a deep sense of the understanding of the word compassion in a biblical Jesus sense. And to some extent, we all don't. We all are striving to get a deeper sense of what these things can mean in our lives and how to grow them. That's what I mean by the process of becoming. Practicing. Pablo Casals, the great legendary cellist, just a treasure for those of you that love classical music. He lived to be 96 or 7 years old, and his wife said, until the day before he died, he had the same ritual. Every morning, he would wake up, he would go to the piano, I could do anything, and he would play 2 preludes and fugues from Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier. Then he'd go and have breakfast. And then on his cello, he would play scales and arpeggios for like a half hour, 35 minutes. Then every single day, he'd play 1 of the 6 Bach cello suites. And he did this every day. And then he went for a walk. And someone once asked him, an interviewer once asked him, why do you do this every day? And Pablo Casals had this great line. He says, I have the sense I'm making progress. I think this is where we want to be as we develop our standing before God, our place in the world, our sense of citizenship. You know, when really learned people deliver lectures or publish books or whatever else, and they speak, you learn something more. You know more than when you left. But when Jesus us, when Jesus utters a word, we become more. His words form people. They give shape to our lives. It's not just about learning more for our heads. Words make things happen. Eugene Peterson says, words make intimacies. They develop trust. They show beauty. They tell the truth. And the words of Jesus do things that neither you or your friends imagine possible with your life. He speaks a word sometimes that may not help you or me know more, but that will certainly help you and me become more than we ever could be if merely left to our own devices. Number 4, I think we need our neighbors like never before, maybe even more than we need friends. And you can define neighbor however you wish. You know, this great commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. Neighbors could be your next door neighbor, they could be your neighborhood, they could be an immigrant, they could be the refugee community, they could be strangers. We know from the Bible that it can mean any number of things. But what's happened in contemporary times is we simply don't depend on them anymore like our ancestors once did. We have enough, most of us, enough income, enough amenities, enough access to technology and hookups that we're largely insulated from our neighbors. It's true in the rural community where I came from the last 3 decades in Iowa. Farmers, they don't depend on each other like they once did. Their cabs and their combines are all equipped with computer systems, and they go online to find the latest pricing for soybeans and corn, and they don't need each other in the same, they have friendships, but they don't need each other as they once did. And Bill McKibben, the environmentalist from Vermont, he says that cheap fossil fuel has made us the first people on Earth who don't need neighbors. Yeah, there's carpooling efforts that happen in communities like this one. If you live in a rural community and there's a volunteer fire department, yeah, there's some neighborliness there. But by and large, your fuel and mine, our shelter, our clothing, our food, our entertainment, our everything is not dependent on our neighbors. It usually comes from a distance. It usually comes to us anonymously. It usually often comes now in a brown box on the front porch. We're in a tough spot because we don't think we need neighbors anymore. And so, love your neighbor in the Jesus words. This isn't a metaphor. As you know, it's a commandment to love the next person that you encounter as much as and as well as you love yourself. Notice when I talked about number 4 here, I said we need our neighbors. And I say that intentionally. We don't need them for economic purposes. I think we need our neighbors for meaning. And frankly, when I watch the landscape and the ecology of church life in America, many churches are boarding up by the week. 10 a week, I think, is what's closing. And it's for all different reasons. Really unfortunate location. The back street of somewhere. A rural community that is just simply shrunk. A building that's colossal and there's no way to maintain it. And there's clergy unavailability and all this other stuff. But I'm telling you, I think that there's a number of congregations that they don't fail to notice the neighbors around their church. They just fail to believe that they need those neighbors. That they're kind of indispensable to them. Upon first glance, it doesn't seem that way. They seem superfluous to our happiness. They seem inconsequential to the way we practice our faith. They're not part of our, strategic thinking, whatever else. So we no longer think we need them. And part of this is due to our, ability to connect so thoroughly with, and so easily in these days. One of my favorite books in the last decade or more is a book that some of you may know. It's by a man named Mark Dunkelman. It's called The Vanishing Neighbor. And in this book, he describes a schematic where there are 3 rings of relationship. There's an inner ring of very intimate relationships. This would be your parents, if you have parents. This would be your kids, if you have kids. This would be your best friends. This would be who's on your favorite contact list on your phone. And you know these people well. I mean, you're probably not going to be enlightened with all kinds of new ideas hanging around them because, frankly, you can complete their sentences. You know exactly how they think. You're well connected. The outer ring are people with whom we share interests. If you're a NASCAR fan, there's NASCAR fans all over this country, and you can meet them online. If you play Mahjong, you can play that online. If you game, you can game with somebody in Indonesia this afternoon. If you love certain progressive causes or certain conservative causes, you can find all that, and you have people that you're acquainted with. It's not very intimate because it's mostly internet, but that's the outer ring. And I think technology's allowed us to invest a whole lot of time into that inner ring of intimate relationships and that outer ring. And the reason Dunkelman named his book The Vanishing Neighbor is because the middle ring is disappearing. The middle ring is what a century ago was the Elks Club, the bowling league, the Lions Club, the congregation, the library, all these places where we would rub shoulders with people with whom we don't necessarily think alike, and being in their presence would challenge us to think with some complexity and some deliberateness, and that is fast disappearing. This middle ring that pierces our echo chambers, that causes us to have to reconsider certain points of view that we think about. This middle ring, where people may have political opinions that are very different than ours. That ring is disappearing for all kinds of reasons, including technology. And as it deteriorates, what does that do? That helps our partisanship grow. Because now you get to ignore and disregard inconvenient facts, inconvenient information, inconvenient viewpoints. There's an allure, there's an ease to nurturing that inner ring and that outer ring. And this is why I personally think, I'm speaking here as a pastor, but I just think congregations are the most beautiful thing. They constitute that middle ring, if you will. And yeah, I don't think there's an organism like them in American culture. And frankly, theologically speaking, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was one who said, you can find Jesus all kinds of places. There's more books about Jesus than ever. But Bonhoeffer has this great line, Christus aus Gemeinde existieren. The only place you can find Christ is in community. You cannot find Christ in your bedtime Bible study rituals. It has to be in community. Jesus, it's another story. Jesus and that, but Christ, only in community. And Eugene Peterson has what I think is the best definition of a Christian congregation. He says, it is the least specialized gathering of human beings on the planet. Where else can you find nursing infants on one side and nodding octogenarians on the other? And rubbing shoulders with so many people with whom you acknowledge, however grudgingly, as brothers and sisters. And the only thing you have in common is your common humanity and God. That's a congregation. And it takes us out of ourselves, and this is that middle ring that's disappearing, and it's one of the reasons I want to talk about the need for our neighbors. You know that great line of MLK Jr., we are tied in this destiny of mutuality. And I can't be who I ought to be until you are who you ought to be. And you can't be who you ought to be until I am who I ought to be. This is just simply the way God's universe is made, said Martin Luther King Jr. On my bookshelf at home, I have taped a William Blake poem. I sought my soul, but my soul I cannot see. I sought my God, but my God eluded me. I sought my neighbor, and I found all three. This is why we need our neighbors, folks. And in this issue of the Christian Century, you pick it up. I wrote a book review by a theologian at Princeton, actually, Hannah Reichel. It's called For Such a Time as This. It's a wonderful little devotional, just 3-4-page chapters. But it's really powerful. And she talks in that book, they talk about not being, having neighbors and meeting neighbors. It's not about affection. You don't have to develop these deep bonds. You don't even have to look for neighbors. You just have to be one in order to find one. And so Reichel talks about, it's not seeking solidarity. It's seeking solidarity. It's not about seeking purity. It's not about having perfect allies, if you will. And neighbors are about a diversity of opinion because that's what's going to produce new insights. And so we're told not to judge others. And it's my encouragement to myself all of the time. Don't judge others simply because they're in a different place, Peter, than you are. Number 5, I want to talk about cultivating tenderness and toughness all at the same time within the same you. When Jesus sent out his disciples, you remember, he sent them out as sheep in the midst of wolves, and then he attached this formula. Be as wise as serpents, as innocent as doves. And Martin Luther King Jr. preached this marvelous sermon in 1959 on this particular passage. And what did he do? What did he suggest in that sermon? He said, those who want to lead really good lives, you have to embrace simultaneously these markedly contrasting opposites, all within yourself. We must combine the toughness of the serpent, said King, and the softness of the dove. So he titled his sermon, A Tough Mind and a Tender Heart. Soft-minded people, King believed, fear change, and hard-hearted people never really learn to love. But those with tough minds learn to be incisive, they learn to be realistic, and those with tender hearts discover how to embrace the world with grace and mercy. And so he concludes in that sermon, God is neither hard-hearted nor soft-minded. God is tough-minded enough to transcend the world and tender-hearted enough to live in the world, which is the incarnate Jesus that we know. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, quote, human kindness has never weakened the stamina or softened the fiber of a free people. A nation does not have to be cruel to be tough. Jimmy Carter, a strong nation, like a strong person, can afford to be gentle and firm, thoughtful, and restrained. It can afford to extend a helping hand to others. Says Carter, it is a weak nation, like a weak person, that must behave with bluster and boasting and rashness and other signs of insecurity. RFK Sr., we now have to say senior since there's a junior on the scene, but on April 4th, 1968, he was making a campaign stop in his run for the presidency in Indianapolis. And he got off the airplane there on the tarmac at Indy Airport when he was told the news of King's assassination, just hours earlier. And so he only made one campaign stop there, just off of the downtown in a neighborhood, and he spoke from the back of a pickup truck. And frankly, if you look it up, it's one of the great speeches, extemporaneous speeches in the 20th century. He didn't have a note in his hand. And the last sentence of that speech he gave before he called off his Indianapolis campaign: let us dedicate ourselves to what the Greeks wrote so many years ago, to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of the world. This is about a tough mind and a tender heart. And I notice among the people that I admire most, those who sacrifice the most in the way of love. Oops, let me back up here just a minute. Let me move on. I want to go to number 6. I want to talk about keeping your eyes on the way you use authority and the ways in which you speak the power. And I use these terms because I think we often confuse them. We confuse authority and we confuse power. Power always has a coercive element to it. Authority does not. There's no coercive element to authority. As the Lutheran theologian Joseph Sigler put it, my grandmother had authority, my grandfather had power. Everything my grandmother said, I wanted to do, and I remember. Everything my grandfather said, I can't remember, except that I had to do it. That's the difference between power and authority. And when Jesus was in the Capernaum synagogue, this is the opening of Mark's gospel, maybe you remember the story, this guy's convulsing on the floor right here in the center aisle, and the ushers are waiting to bring the offering forward or whatever's happening, and people are getting apoplectic in the sanctuary because this doesn't happen. The guy's foaming at the mouth, and Jesus heals him. The demons come out. I think the people are just awed. The Bible says they were astonished. And what were they astonished by? He had authority, unlike the scribes and others. Not power, he had authority. So I think Jesus continued to exercise his authority, not through a love of power, but through the power of love. And this is what I see in people that I admire, those who, in fact, sacrifice the most in the way of love. They also happen to end up with the greatest authority. Jesus had no political power, cult. He didn't have private armies he could send into cities. He didn't have any special wealth. He didn't have, particular social prestige. He just was invitational. And we don't see him positioning himself to make other people do what he commands. He simply offers a way of life and hopes that people will find that desirable. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in a sermon on 2 Corinthians 12, Christianity adjusts itself far too easily to the worship of power, and Christians should give much more offense than they do. Christians should always take a stronger stand in favor of the weak rather than considering first the possible right of the strong. We could talk at length, and I won't go into it here, but I have serious questions about using the concept of almightiness when we refer to God. Some of us learn in our younger years, confirmation or otherwise, there's omniscience, all-knowing, omnipotence, all-powerful, and omnipresence, that God's everywhere. But never once were we taught that God is all-loving. And there's certain things that love won't do. And oh my gosh, there's this great theologian of the past, R.A. Brower. He was a great ecumenical leader in the world. He's dying in the hospital of cancer. His son comes to visit him. He's 57 years old. And his son says, Dad, I don't get it. You and your mom have given so much of your life to church. And you don't deserve this. What is this all about? And he goes on to say, son, I'm not sure God can do anything about it. And his son's like, nonplussed. What do you mean? And Dad says, I actually did a word study. And in the New Testament, the word Almighty appears 13 times. 12 of them are in the book of Revelation. And he said, I have no doubt that God's power will be known when all things come full circle. But right now, I'm not sure God can do anything about it. I'd rather see God as, suffering right in this little hospital room with me. I'll go into that. Number 7. Constancy. I want for you and I want for me a congruity between a sense of congruity between my inner life and my outer life. So in my desk drawer, I have a tuning fork from middle C. And I'll tell you why. It was given to me, actually. There's a great story from the life of Lloyd Douglas. Lloyd Douglas published many books, famous for The Robe in the early 1940s, a historical novel about the crucifixion. And when Lloyd Douglas was living in a boarding house in Springfield, Ohio, at the turn of the century, maybe 1901 or 2, he lived upstairs. And on the ground floor was a retired music teacher. And one of the duties of Lloyd Douglas was to check in on this guy. So every morning, it was the same ritual. Douglas would go down the steps, he'd knock on the door, he'd open the door, and he'd say to this retired music teacher, "What's the good news?" The retired music teacher, he'd take this tuning fork, he'd bang it on his wheelchair, he'd say, "That's middle C. That was middle C yesterday, that will be middle C tomorrow, and that will be middle C 1,000 years from now. The tenor upstairs sings flat. The piano across the hallway, that's out of tune. But, my friend," he said, "that's middle C." Herman Melville, Moby Dick, about the whaling ship in the Atlantic and the Indian and the Pacific Ocean. There's this great section in that book where we're told that there's a lantern that hangs in the cabin's captain of the Pequod, the ship. And Melville talks about that lantern and despite whatever the seas were doing, rolling and heaving those waves, that lantern always hung perpendicular to a line that cut through the center of the earth. And that lantern, says Melville, revealed the false and lying realities that surrounded the ship. It always hung perpendicular. Well, if you think about this, friends, this is the shape of the cross. If you don't have a cross hanging in your house, find one. It will continually remind you of the constancy of Jesus Christ yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It will always, if it's hanging straight, there'll be a line that's perpendicular with a line that runs to the center of the earth. And I think it brings perspective on our lives. What does that mean for these times? I think, if you're going to follow the news, limit your exposure a little bit. Keep asking yourself when you read and read and read about all these obliterating feeds, am I really gaining new information? Or am I giving my attention away? As Hannah Reichel says in the book that I highlighted, am I focusing on what matters, or am I just getting dizzy? Are you communicating something to someone specifically when you post something, or are you just posting out of inner restlessness? There needs to be this virtue of constancy in the Christian life. And finally, I'll wrap up here. Number 8, I want to talk about a winsome kind of love. A particular kind of goodness that you and I can embrace in our lives. In the New Testament, there's 2 Greek words for the word good. The word agathos appears 102 times in 91 separate verses. And interestingly enough, another word for good in the New Testament is kalos. That also appears 102 times. It also appears in 91 verses. What's the difference? Agathos is something that's good in character. A bowl of warm soup. Pastries from Crossroads. Agathos is something that's intrinsically good. Kalos is different. It's not just good, but it's lovely. It's beautiful. It's attractive. It has a compelling quality to it. It's an aesthetic good. It has this way of drawing people in. If you have a kalos personality, you have a winsomeness about you. We all know people who are scrupulously correct, They do everything right. But the rightness lacks a warmth and a beauty to it. And we all know others who are no less concerned about doing the right thing and behaving correctly, but who are lovely and who have an inviting way about them. Their goodness is desirable. It is winsome. And if we're going to build a healthy and inviting society, we need people with a moral goodness that has a winsome quality about it. Matthew 5:16. We speak at baptism. Let your light so shine before others that they may see your good works. That's kalos. Not just that you're serving in some way, but that you're serving with a kind of attraction to it, a kind of compelling winsomeness about it. Reinhold Niebuhr, the great 20th century theologian, you may be able to compel people to maintain certain minimum standards by stressing duty, but the highest moral and spiritual achievements depend not on a push, but on a pull. It's this attractional quality that we want about our faith lives. This was Niebuhr's way of saying, we need lovely aspects to our personhood that's going to be somehow affecting others positively. John 10, I am the good shepherd. That's not agathos. Like Jesus knows exactly how to shear sheep or something. It's kalos. I'm the good shepherd. There's something winsome about being in the presence of Jesus that people... Mary and Martha story, Luke 10. The one's going in the dishwasher, and Mary's the one, Jesus says, you have chosen the good portion, the good part, the good thing. That's kalos. Well, it's 58 minutes here, and I need to stop. I could talk about joy and curiosity and wonder and faith and many other things that I think are also indispensable to forming, this moral life that we all seek to make better. But let me open it for your comments and questions. Thank you.
Yeah, we have about 20-25 minutes for some conversation, discussion. I think the words that fill this auditorium over the last hour were infused with chaos. And so we are recording this, and so please share it with at least 10 friends or neighbors to invite people into this winsome view of what it means to behave Christianly. I'll ferry the microphone to folks who have thoughts or comments. Is there someone who would get us started with a question? Of course.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much. It was a really, really enjoyable presentation you had. So I wrote it down this time. I usually write things down. The last time I was at some place, I was typing into my phone. My wife asked me, "Why are you looking at your phone the whole time?" So I decided to write it down. So I look at it. Anyway, I liked all day. I'd like to add a night. So you were talking about winsome kind of love. You're talking about good character. You're talking about someone who's attractive. And I think a lot of times that's certainly desirable to have that. But I think from my work experience, etc., sometimes you just need somebody who's capable. And so, because you're not going to always find someone who's winsome. Sometimes you just need somebody who's capable.
Yeah.
So I just like to add that.
That's a great point. Anytime I've been a part of a hiring process in our staff over the years, I care a lot more about someone's capability, even if they don't have the skills yet. You can just tell they've got the instincts, they've got the good sensibilities. But I would say capable people are also, capable of growing. I don't think any of us are fated to be a certain kind of way. You may say, "I'm an introvert, Peter." Well, you may be an introvert, but that doesn't mean you can't learn extroversion. Or I'm an extrovert. Well, that doesn't mean you can't learn restraint and, holding your tongue. So I'm of the belief that you can be really capable, but this is an edge that we all get to grow in our lives. My definition for an authentic person is who God made you to be from the inside out, and to spend your life wrestling with the meaning of that. An inauthentic person is who other people want you to be from the outside in. And I think that's something we want to refuse. I think it's something we want to keep distance from. And so, yes, capacity is a great thing, but how fun it is to mature in other ways and to develop that element that I'm trying to talk about here, winsome love.
So I wanted to say, as we're talking, don't be sheepish about getting coffee or things, a little less formal sit-down moments. So if you need to get up, go ahead. Yeah, Les.
So I came here today with a couple of questions, and you addressed them all. So I'm not sure what to ask, but I did listen to your acceptance speech for your recognition at Yale, and you said you became a deeper person. And I think you addressed that to us today, is how to become a deeper person. Oh. But my question for you is, what would Bonhoeffer think about today's climate in the United States?
Yeah, what he's referencing is, I had a professor at Yale who said, he was an Old Testament prof, Bard Child, and he said, if you want to become a better preacher, become a deeper person. And I think that's true of, if you want to become a better pastor, if you want to become a better anything, a librarian, become a deeper person. So I really hold to that, and that has something to do with this center that I'm talking about. It's really interesting, this Bonhoeffer question, we've written about it in the Christian Century. In fact, last year, our most popular article was about a misuse of Bonhoeffer for these times. is this a Bonhoeffer moment? And people will ask. And I'd be the last one to put words into Bonhoeffer's mouth or guess what he's thinking at. But clearly, in a week, by the way, there's a banner of our president's face hanging from the Justice Department, which evokes for a lot of people images from Germany in the 1930s. I think Bonhoeffer would hope that people like you and me are adhering to our faith and giving a priority to our citizenship in heaven. That we have this ultimate loyalty to God. And I don't know if he'd be very prescriptive about what our nation should be doing at this point. I think his concern would be, what do we as people of faith want to adhere our lives to? What do we want to bond to? What do we want to be known for? He, as we know, had a particular form of moral courage that cost him his life. But I don't think he would be, except to point out the ominous clouds that are hovering on the horizon, I don't think he would be one to be addressing what should this nation be doing with respect to its justice system. But he would be looking each and every one of us in the eye and saying, who are you? And who do you want to be? And the choice is obvious. If you know the least bit about the Lord's unconditional love for you, that's big. That'd be my best guess. Gosh, he died at 39. Martin Luther King Jr. died at 39. I was just thinking the other day, what happened if these guys had lived a full life? What might have been different? Obviously, we would benefit from the martyrdom because they're put in different perspective. Words become more cherished. But man, what if Lincoln could have lived beyond 56 or whatever? It's been so fascinating to see Reconstruction under Lincoln as opposed to Johnson. So we don't know, but great question, great comment.
Under your section 4, you talked about the vanishing middle ground. And I was just wondering if you could comment on how we individually could try to reconstruct that?
That's a great question. Very few of us are in charge of organizing communities. Some of you are. You head up committees. You work on village improvement plans. You run outreach teams at your church. Honestly, I actually think it happens. The building that middle ring can happen one person at a time. When Jesus talks about loving your neighbors, he doesn't talk about loving the whole world. He's talking about one individual at a time. The Good Samaritan, who loads up this wounded individual on a donkey and pays the innkeeper or whatever. This is one person. This is not solving through USAID the global problems of whatever. So just think of the rest of your day today, folks. I don't know, if you don't go straight home, or you have some encounter at a restaurant or a store or with a clerk, just think about your engagement with that person. I was saying to Matt last night, I'm working with a landscaper to help me build a pergola in my backyard. And in Denver, there's a large Hispanic community. I go to the Home Depot. I was there some months ago at 7 p.m. Home Depots are huge everywhere. And I'm checking out and I realized I am the only Caucasian in this entire store. Not a single staff member, not a single patron. So it's a huge community. And here's this Hispanic guy in my backyard, and he's working with another partner. Neither speak practically a speck of English, but Victor does pretty well. And I was so pleased after his 5 days of work. He paid attention to detail, and he painted little bolts on his pergola, black, so that they wouldn't stand out. And I thanked him. I mean, he gave extra time. He stayed till dark. So I slipped him a tip, a generous tip, inside of an envelope. And I just handed it to him. I wrote gracias on the envelope. And he just about had tears in his eyes. He says, nobody's ever done this to me. Nobody's ever done this for me. And I said, well, Victor, you do really good work. You attend to details, and I care about this. And you didn't have to, but you did. I said, well, thank you so much. Well, That was a brief encounter, but he helped affect my life when he said that statement, and I think I affected his life by honoring him. And I think we need to do person by person to build that middle ring. Suddenly, you're a community this morning, and you come from all these different places. Granted, none of you are from Denver today, or this is the East Coast, Philadelphia here, but you're an interesting menagerie of people. And I think we form those communities one at a time.
Just a comment and then a question. But condolences on the passing of your father, who was one of my teachers at the University of Chicago. And he described, this is the comment, he described the congregations and those associations in a tweet that you described so beautifully as mediating institutions. You know, he said that you could do things as a change agent and get some cover in a mediating institution that you can't get individually sometimes. But here's a question. Brian Garish, his colleague, asked us, did not provide an answer, but you provided some really good answers to the question, can we even speak of conscience after Auschwitz? That in the modern world, we've become so indifferent to suffering, he said. And humankind can become accustomed to anything.
Well, I think you all know the opposite of hatred is not love, but it's indifference. And we got to think seriously about this. There are people in our time, and I pray it's not us in this room, but that are just silent about so much. And you can translate that to read as indifference. Because if you really felt something, you would say something. But and in the news recently has been the misuse of the word Holocaust. Maybe you read about this, but I would sort of subscribe to the Jewish point of view here that you can only use the word Holocaust in reference to the Holocaust. It's just simply a blasphemy to the Jews to say anything else. Every time we have a major fire or whatever else. So I want to refrain from using that word. But I'm scared about indifference. And I think in mediating communities that you're describing, we have the chance to express ourselves and try to learn language with which to address crises. And you don't have to be doggedly certain about everything. We evolve. This is the beautiful thing. And we change each other's perspectives, or we deepen them. And that's the power of a mediating institution. If you want to hang around like-minded people, join a political party. But if you don't want that, join a congregation where we're supposed to be different. We're supposed to affect each other in beautiful ways. And we have to find thoughtful ways to speak up. I'm going to write my next column about I get so many emails from pastors who say, I preach about kindness and I'm told that I'm preaching anti-Trump, or I'm preaching politics. And how do you do this? And so I want to talk about the methods of getting there. So congregations wrestle with how to speak thoughtfully, but I think the way we get to use each other in the context of shaping our responses is really valid and beautiful. Because everything about the internet simply, I only have as my favorite or my star, what do you call, bookmark, sites. I have my own sites, you have your own sites. And they're gonna feed me what they feed me. But they're not you. And if we get to live together for even an hour and a half this morning, we impact each other. And I just find that lovely.
Got time for a few more. We got a youngster over here with a question.
Frank, I've been waiting to hear from you.
Thank you for speaking.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for speaking.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
And Frank wanted me to say that the church that you and Mac got to spend time at together must be a really awesome church. Okay, I have a question about formation that's not fully formed, but it sounded like you were about to go there. At the end of what you were saying, and I think what I'm most curious about is what you would say to us, all of us who are in the saints, leaders, ministers, neighbors in Doylestown about formation, knowing things like, of course we are still becoming, as you named, and our young people are too, and our neighbors are too. And we, thinking about St. Paul's Lutheran at least, we're not boarding up. There are several congregations in Doylestown that are not boarding up, which feels like this beautiful opportunity. And I'm wondering what you would say we might do with that in this moment where we might just have the opportunity to dig deep around formation for ourselves and for the young people in our midst.
Well, that is a big question. But I think, I don't know the details of St. Paul's, but whether you're a medium-sized congregation, a large place, a small place, as I was saying to a couple of you, just to get together and to spend your energy creatively and curiously, to take some risks. I was going to bring some beautiful poems I have about taking risks, because I just love that piece of Christianity. And we are pretty tame people. And I think we need to be, be a little more adventurous. Don't be afraid to try something liturgically or prayerfully or in terms of outreach. And I think one of the ministries of your church is to figure out ways to share the stories that are told, and I think that's magnificent. Our job is not to become so self-contented or so prideful of the latest story we've heard or the latest experience we've had, but to transform that somehow into just this deep affection for other people. I want everybody I meet to matter to me. I used to, Matt knows, I kind of cherish names, and in our parish of 3,500 people, I knew every single person's name. I forget a few of the kids, but I told myself a long time ago, in fact, the pastoral resident asked me, Peter, what's your trick? Well, first of all, you work at it. But second of all, it occurred to me that the eyes of every person you look at, either they matter to you or they don't. Why are each and every one of you important to me? I wish I could spend more time with you. But if you were to walk into my church for the first day as a guest, what does it matter that you've never been there before? You don't know where the restrooms are. You may not know how many cups of coffee we serve on a Sunday. But so what? You have deep experience. You have a rich background. You probably have this trusting faith that I wish I had. And so why would I treat you as an oddity, as some kind of curious species, We outlaw the word visitor. You can't use visitor in our church. You're not a visitor. Nobody wants to be a visitor. Visitors sit in the wimpy bleachers on the far side of the stadium, and the home field gets all the concrete bleachers that are massive. Nobody wants to be a visitor. You're a guest. We're all guests in the house of the Lord. And just because it's your first time there, that doesn't mean you have anything less than I have in the Lord. And so, forming faith is something I think we do together. I think we need to take more risks, be more adventurous, and anytime you stick your neck out really far, you can check it with other people and say, well, let's do this together. We got to figure out a way. It's not a helpful answer, but it's music. One more?
Yeah, I think maybe the last one.
Thank you. I do practice my religion, my spirituality, and I feel good when I do something kind to somebody else. But I have to admit that I'm discouraged and frustrated and angry with what is going on, and I'm thinking, is my faith not strong enough that I believe get better, that God will help resolve what's going on in our world, in our politics, because it's very frightening to me. So it's not a question, it's just a way to share my worry and my fears.
Sure. Well, yeah, I think this is a good way to close. I don't want to be resistant to anger. Jesus could turn tables, but I also want to make sure that it's not my way of life. Empires do end. It's not a lot of comfort if you're somebody without a green card now and you're fearing deportation when you've got a good life here. That's not comfort. I realize that. But I do think in the midst of recognizing that empires end and all of us die, and all our present leaders die, and life moves on, I do think we need to make sure that we find moments of beauty and we cherish joy. Because I don't want to be a person who just laments every day, who lives such a discouraged life that you're uninteresting to be around. And if we can't spot that, happy preschool kid, or that adult chaperone who spends her entire day working with someone with severe disabilities, and the beauty of that, someone would commit their life to that. If we lose sight of all the beautiful things in society, we're a people most to be pitied. And so I think there are expressions of outrage that are really valuable, but hang on to the beauty of the joy that is within you. When Jesus talks about abundant life, I just think we can't neglect the little things that make today hum in this neighborhood, in your lives, and that the sun is shining upon right now. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Peter. I feel I will take home with me that sense of becoming a Christian rather than being one. And I think we all, for those of us on that particular journey, for me, I'm hoping to take many of the insights today and actualize them tomorrow in a way that helps me become more like a Christian. So thank you for pointing the way. I want to thank our hospitality crew as well. There's really great treats back there. So grab a napkin and a plate, take some Crossroads home, bring them to share with your neighbor. Hey, let's actualize this talk a bit. And more copies of the magazine back there. So there's plenty for everyone. Don't leave without grabbing a copy. I can't wait for your next column, because I could use help with that as well. So, all right, let us go in peace, and thank you all for coming out. Thanks again, Pete.